My name is Nerissa White, and I was 32 years old when my sister decided the internet would be a better judge of my life than she ever was. That afternoon didn't feel important while I was living it. It rarely does when things are about to break. I was sitting on the low steps outside our apartment building, the kind with chipped paint and loose railings that rattle when kids run past too fast. The sun was still high but soft, warm enough to make the concrete radiate heat through the thin denim of my jeans. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, watching my daughter draw on the sidewalk with a stub of pink chalk she'd found in her backpack. She was 8, still young enough to believe colors could fix things. She hummed to herself while she worked, brow furrowed in concentration, dragging uneven lines across the pavement. A lopsided house. A sun with too many rays. Stick figures holding hands. She didn't notice me watching her the way mothers do when they're tired but grateful, worn down but still standing. I didn't know anyone else was watching. I didn't know someone had lifted their phone, framed us just right, and decided this moment, our moment, would make good content. My phone vibrated in my hand. At first, I ignored it. Notifications were constant these days. Group chats I'd muted. School reminders. Spam texts pretending to care about my extended warranty. I was too tired to look. Tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. Then it buzzed again. I glanced down without thinking, thumb hovering lazily over the screen. And that's when I saw the name. My sister. My older sister. The one who always said she worried about me. The one who told people she helped raise my daughter when Nerissa couldn't get it together. The one who smiled sweetly in public and sharpened her words in private. I tapped the notification. For a second, my brain refused to understand what my eyes were seeing. Like when you read a sentence in the wrong order and have to go back again. There was a photo. Of me. Of my daughter. Taken from across the parking lot. Angled just enough to catch my tired posture, my messy bun, the dark circles under my eyes I hadn't bothered concealing anymore. My daughter was barefoot, chalk dust smeared on her knees, crouched low like she always did when she got serious about drawing. We looked small. Exposed. Above the photo was a caption. When mistakes raise mistakes. My chest tightened, so suddenly I had to stop breathing for a second. I stared at the screen, convinced the words would rearrange themselves if I waited long enough. I refreshed the page. Once. Twice. 3 times. They stayed exactly where they were. My full name was tagged in blue. And worse, so was my daughter. My hands started shaking. Not dramatically. Just enough that I had to lock my elbows against my thighs to keep from dropping my phone. I scrolled. The comments were already there, stacking on top of each other like they'd been waiting for permission. Someone I went to high school with. Classic Nerissa. A distant cousin. This is sad, honestly. A woman I barely knew from the neighborhood. Some people really shouldn't have kids. Then came the reactions. Laughing emojis. Side-eye faces. A few bless her heart comments that somehow felt worse than outright cruelty. And then I saw the likes. My stomach dropped when I recognized the names. My aunt. My uncle. My mother. My father. They hadn't commented. They hadn't defended me. They hadn't even stayed neutral. They had liked it. That was the moment something inside me cracked, not loudly, not all at once, but in a slow, sinking way that felt permanent. Like realizing the floor you've been standing on for years was never solid to begin with. Inside the apartment, through the open window, my daughter laughed at something on TV. A bright cartoon jingle floated out into the afternoon air, cheerful and completely wrong for what was happening. She had no idea. No idea that the word mistake was being wrapped around her existence and passed around for entertainment by the people who shared her blood. I scrolled again, my vision blurring. Then I saw my cousin Natalie's comment. This is what happens when you treat family like trash and expect handouts. That one hurt differently. Not because it was clever, but because it was calculated. 2 weeks earlier, my sister had called me crying. Said she was desperate. Said she needed money, just for a little while. Not for rent. Not for groceries. For a car. She said she needed it to get to work. Promised she'd pay me back. Swore it was different this time. It was never different. I had said no. And now, sitting on those steps, watching strangers and relatives laugh at my child, it finally clicked. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't thoughtless. This was punishment. And it was only just beginning. I wanted to throw my phone. I wanted to scream until my lungs gave out. Instead, I pressed it to my chest, as if holding it close could somehow undo the damage. My daughter, oblivious, traced a crooked circle with her chalk, humming a tune I didn't recognize. How could anyone take that, her joy, her innocence, and twist it into a weapon against me? I thought about calling my sister. I thought about confronting her, telling her she had crossed every possible line. But what could I say that would make a difference? The truth was out there now, public, permanent. Deleting the post would never erase the humiliation. I had to endure it. And worse, I had to watch my daughter, her small hand smearing colors across the pavement, becoming part of the story my sister was telling the world. The truth was, this wasn't the first time she had tried to humiliate me. There was always a competition, subtle at first. Who was better at parenting, at managing life, at keeping appearances? I had ignored it for years, convinced that family was supposed to be complicated, but ultimately protective. I had been wrong. I remembered the mornings she would come by for coffee and end up critiquing my apartment, my kitchen, my parenting choices. You really shouldn't let her watch cartoons before homework, she'd say. And you need a new vacuum. Always the critic, never the helper. And now all those little jabs were compiled, amplified, posted online with a cruel, flashing spotlight. I scrolled further, desperate, unwillingly curious. The comments multiplied. Friends of my sister, who I barely knew, were tagging others, laughing at a joke I didn't understand. A neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years wrote, "Poor kid, stuck with her mother?" My stomach twisted. My hands clenched around the phone. My daughter called my name, pulling me back to the present. She wanted to show me her rainbow. I forced a smile, leaned down and nodded. "It's beautiful," I said, meaning it. Because in her world, it was. But in mine, it was chaos. I felt like a character in a story I didn't get to write, one where my sister held the pen and my family applauded her narrative. I thought about my husband, the man I was separated from, in the middle of a slow, bitter divorce. He hadn't spoken to me in weeks. The paperwork was waiting in the attorney's office, the finality of it looming. And yet, as I scrolled through the comments, a quiet hope sparked in me. Maybe he would say something. Maybe he'd recognize the cruelty for what it was. But I quickly pushed that hope down. He was gone. Not emotionally, not physically, not in any way that mattered anymore. The next hour blurred. The calls and texts I had ignored came through. Concerned friends, confused relatives, people I didn't even know well enough to answer. I left them all unread. There was nothing they could do. Only I could decide. What came next? I remember the argument 2 weeks ago, the one about money. She had called me at work, voice shaking, claiming urgency, desperation, innocence. I had refused. Not cruelly, not without thought, but firmly. Because every time I had trusted her, every time I had extended a hand, it had been used against me. Not once, not twice, but again and again. My bank account, my energy, my trust, all drained in ways that only I noticed until it was too late. And now, sitting on the curb, I realized this post was her revenge. My silence, my refusal to bend to her whims, my choice to stand up for myself. She was punishing me publicly. My daughter had been caught in the crossfire. I felt something shift inside me. Anger, yes, but also clarity. This was not about embarrassment alone. This was about power. My sister had always wanted control. She wanted me small, me apologetic, me submissive. And now she had tried to extend that control to my child. I couldn't allow it. Not again. Not ever. I decided right there on the warm concrete that I would not react blindly. I would not engage with the trolls, the commenters, the family members who thought this was funny. I would take action carefully, strategically, with precision. First, evidence. Screenshots. Every comment, every like, every tag. I saved it all, labeling folders by time and date. This was going to matter if things escalated. I had learned the hard way that documentation was power. It had kept me safe before, and it would now. Next, boundaries. I made a silent vow that no one, not my sister, not my parents, not anyone, would ever use my child to shame me again. I didn't need to post a rebuttal. I didn't need to explain myself. Silence could be just as strong when wielded like armor. Finally, I needed perspective. I looked at my daughter, kneeling in the chalk dust, her small hands colored in blue and pink streaks. She was unaware of the humiliation, unaware of the calculated cruelty unfolding just inches from her. And maybe that was the most important thing. I had to protect her world, her innocence, even if mine had already been fractured. Hours passed. The sun began to dip, casting long shadows over the apartment steps. My phone buzzed again. And this time, it wasn't my sister. It was someone else. Someone I hadn't expected. My husband. I stared at the notification, thumb hovering. My first thought was disbelief. He had barely spoken to me in weeks. Our separation had been slow, cold, methodical. Why now? Why this? The answer would change everything. My thumb hovered over the screen for what felt like forever. The notification was from him, my husband, but it wasn't a message, not a text. It was a photo. I hesitated, unsure if I even wanted to open it. Part of me feared what I might see. Another part hoped it would be proof that someone, anyone, was on my side. I tapped. The image loaded, crisp and shocking. It was my sister. Standing in a coffee shop parking lot, laughing, her hand wrapped around a man who wasn't her husband. His fingers were entwined with hers like they belonged there. Her head leaned in close, lips curved into a smile I didn't recognize. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, just like her post about me and my daughter. But now the spotlight had shifted. The world could see her hypocrisy, her lies, her betrayal. A strange laugh escaped me. Not joyful, not even satisfying. It was dark, quiet, almost involuntary. It felt like justice finally tipping the scales, a silent reckoning that didn't require my intervention. The internet would do its work, and this time, I wasn't the target. I wasn't the punchline. I was watching. Comments exploded instantly. People recognized the man. Friends of my sister's old babysitting clients, distant neighbors, co-workers, they were tagging each other, sharing screenshots, whispering gossip that had teeth. My cousin Natalie? Silent. My aunt? Gone. My parents? Their likes vanished as quickly as they had appeared. I sank back onto the curb, letting the phone rest in my lap. My daughter had finished her rainbow. She had crawled over to me, chalk smudged across her palms. Look, Mommy. It's a double rainbow, she said, eyes wide, excitement pure. For a moment, the weight in my chest lightened. The world outside our little bubble could collapse and burn, but inside, she was safe. Her joy hadn't been touched. Not yet. I thought about calling my sister, about confronting her directly, but I didn't. The photo from my husband said enough. She was already unraveling, exposed in a way she hadn't anticipated. The universe had delivered her consequences. My role was to remain calm, to protect my child, and to watch carefully. Then my phone buzzed again. It was him, this time a text. I can't undo what they did, but I can make sure it stops. I stared at the words, my mind racing. Make it stop? How? He had been absent, physically and emotionally, for months. And yet, in one move, he had shifted the balance of power. The people who had mocked, judged, and humiliated me, he was challenging them, silently but unmistakably. I had underestimated him. I had judged his quietness as distance, his calm as disinterest. Now I realized it had been restraint, patience, strategy. That evening, when I tucked my daughter into bed, I thought about all the little ways my family had tried to control me over the years. The comments, the judgments, the comparisons. How they had whispered behind my back, questioned my parenting, minimized my accomplishments. And now, after years of quiet compliance, I had allies. and I had boundaries. But the relief was fragile. That night, the notifications didn't stop. Screenshots of my sister's betrayal circulated like wildfire. People I didn't even know messaged me privately, some expressing disbelief, others showing solidarity. How could they wrote. You did nothing wrong. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My head was spinning. My chest ached. I realized, with a mix of exhaustion and clarity, that the fight wasn't over. Not yet. It was only beginning. The next morning, my sister came to our building. She didn't knock. She pounded on the door, her voice shrill, demanding answers. "What did you do?" she shouted. "Why did you post that photo?" I didn't open the door. I stayed silent, listening as she shouted my name, called me cruel, said I had ruined her life. My daughter peeked from her bedroom doorway, curiosity written across her small face, but I gently ushered her back and whispered, "Go play, baby. Mommy's handling this." Minutes later, the chaos escalated. My parents arrived, followed by my aunt and cousin. They crowded the porch, shouting over each other, dragging old grievances into the present moment, accusing me of shaming the family, of destroying bonds, of betraying them. I didn't respond. My phone sat on the counter, silent, the screen facing down, a shield against the barrage of criticism. Then he arrived. I saw him pull up in his car, calm, composed, and completely unflustered. He didn't rush. He didn't yell. He didn't get drawn into their storm. He stepped out and walked past my father without hesitation, up to the porch. My sister rushed at him, yelling, but he didn't flinch. He didn't respond. He only looked at her, steady, unwavering, as if the weight of all her chaos couldn't touch him. I felt a shift, a sense of safety, a sliver of control returning to my hands. For the first time in weeks, I realized I wasn't alone in this. My child's laughter from the other room, the small echoes of normalcy in our apartment, and the unwavering presence of my husband in the doorway, all of it reminded me that I could survive this humiliation, that we could survive this. And I knew, deep in my bones, that this moment, this intersection of cruelty and justice, was the turning point. The narrative was changing. The target of scorn was no longer me. The lesson was becoming clear. No one, not even family, would control me, not with my daughter in my life and not with the truth now out in the open. The banging started before I even had time to think. My sister's voice carried across the hall, sharp and frantic, calling my name, demanding answers. I pressed my back against the door, heart racing, praying my daughter wouldn't wander into the hallway. My phone lay on the kitchen counter, face down, buzzing silently with notifications I refused to check. The shouting didn't stop. It escalated, growing louder with each passing minute. And then I heard cars crunching on the gravel outside. My parents' sedan pulled up, followed by my aunt's minivan, and of course, Natalie's small hatchback. They spilled out, all of them, eyes blazing, voices raised, marching like an army with grievances as ammunition. My sister stormed ahead, fists clenched, anger radiating off her like heat. I stayed behind the door. My daughter's small hands gripped her blanket, eyes wide, frightened by the chaos she couldn't understand. I whispered to her, "Go to your room, sweetie. Mommy's fine." She hesitated, then obeyed. That was the last thing that mattered to me in that moment, her safety. They surrounded the porch. My sister pounded on the door, screaming accusations I couldn't even parse fully. "You've ruined everything. You've humiliated me. You've turned everyone against me." Her voice cracked as she added, "And you even dragged her into this." She jabbed a finger toward my daughter's room. My hands tightened on the doorknob, knuckles white. My mother joined in, her voice high and cutting. "How dare you post that picture? You've crossed a line, Nerissa. You need to come outside and fix this." My father stood behind her, silent but rigid, eyes cold, arms crossed. He didn't stop her. He never did. My aunt chimed in, banging a broomstick against the window like this was some twisted farce, trying to make it feel like humor instead of confrontation. Natalie raised her phone, trying to capture it all, documenting what she considered evidence. But I didn't care. I felt a surge of anger unlike anything I had experienced before. My family, my own blood, had spent years undermining me, judging me, manipulating me, and now they wanted public compliance on top of everything else. I wasn't going to give it to them. I reached for my phone, trembling slightly. My husband's number was saved at the top. I dialed, keeping the line open while they screamed outside. He answered almost immediately, his calm voice cutting through the chaos. "I'm on my way," he said simply. No hesitation. No panic. Just resolve. Within minutes, I saw his truck roll up, and something in my chest unclenched. He stepped out, the picture of steady composure, walking past my father as if he weren't even there. My sister rushed toward him, yelling accusations, but he didn't flinch. He didn't engage. He only looked at her, unreadable, unwavering. Her energy collided with his calm and faltered instantly. I opened the door just enough to see the confrontation, but I didn't step outside. He was speaking quietly now, words I couldn't hear, but his presence alone commanded attention. My sister froze mid-rant. My mother's face went red with fury. Natalie lowered her phone, unsure now who the target of scrutiny was. My aunt stopped banging the broomstick. My father's rigid posture softened, uncertainty creeping into his gaze. For the first time, I realized the balance had shifted. The predator had become the prey. The shouting outside continued, muffled, but I felt safe enough to step back and breathe. My husband had established a line they could not cross. He didn't need to shout, and he didn't. One simple presence, one quiet assertion of control, and the chaos lost its power over me. Inside, I turned to see my daughter peek out from her bedroom doorway. She was clutching her blanket, unsure if she should come closer. I smiled at her, silently signaling that everything was fine. She didn't fully understand what had just happened, and I was determined to keep it that way. Her world, her innocence, was mine to protect. Minutes passed. The visitors outside began to disperse, muttering, frustrated. One by one, cars pulled away, tires crunching on gravel, leaving only echoes of anger. My sister's face was red, frozen in disbelief, unable to comprehend that her plan had been undone without anyone raising a hand at her directly. My mother's glare lingered on the house as she finally drove away. The quiet that followed was heavy but different. Not tense. Not fearful. Just relieved. I sank into the nearest chair, hands shaking, chest heaving. The house felt lighter now, though the chaos had left tangible traces. The broken garden gnome, the tipped recycling bins, the shattered bird feeder that had belonged to my grandmother. I looked at the pieces, feeling a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. They had tried to intimidate me, to shame me, to drag my daughter into their narrative. And yet, here I was, standing intact, protected by calmness, strategy, and one unexpected ally. He came inside after a moment, his footsteps quiet, deliberate. He didn't lecture me. He didn't ask for thanks. He simply moved around the kitchen, fixing mugs, straightening the chairs, cleaning up minor messes with steady hands. His calmness was contagious. For the first time in weeks, I felt like we could exist in the same space without fear, without resentment clouding every glance. I picked up the shattered pieces of the bird feeder, stacking them carefully on the counter. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in acknowledgement. These things could be replaced. The lessons, the trauma, the humiliation, they couldn't. And that realization gave me an unexpected clarity. I looked at him. "Thank you," I whispered, though I wasn't sure he needed the words. He only nodded, small, subtle, but full of understanding. No speeches. No over-explanations. Just presence. Just stability. Just proof that some people can choose to stand for what's right, even when everyone else chooses chaos. That night, the house was quiet. My daughter slept peacefully, unaware of the storm outside our door. I placed my phone face down on the counter, finally feeling the weight of the notifications lift. The family group chat was silent. No apologies. No explanations. Just absence. And for the first time in a long while, I realized absence could be as powerful as confrontation. I sank into the couch, exhausted, finally allowing myself to breathe fully. The chaos had come and gone. The threat had passed. And yet, in the quiet, I felt a flicker of something more. Something fragile, something hopeful. Perhaps, after everything, the balance had finally shifted in our favor. Perhaps, this time, the story would be ours to tell. The next morning was almost eerily quiet. The street outside our apartment was empty, the chaos from yesterday reduced to the occasional discarded cup or a stray leaf tumbling across the pavement. I had just dropped my daughter at school, watching her skip inside, backpack bouncing, completely unaware that less than 24 hours ago, the people who were supposed to love her had tried to humiliate her and me online. As I drove back into the driveway, I felt a strange combination of exhaustion and clarity. My phone buzzed again. Multiple notifications, but this time not from family. Screenshots, comments, and messages from strangers, people I had never met, flooded in. I can't believe your own family would do that. You handled that better than anyone could. Your daughter is lucky to have you.
I didn't respond.
I couldn't. Reading them made my chest tighten in a different way, a mixture of relief, validation, and lingering anger. It was a quiet confirmation that I had been right to stay calm, to stand my ground, to protect my child. By mid-morning, the first fallout from my sister's photo began to show. Her post, previously hidden behind likes and laughter, was now public scrutiny. People began piecing together her actions, the affair she had tried to hide, the hypocrisy, the lies. Friends, acquaintances, even distant neighbors, all tagging one another, sharing the image my husband had sent me, exposing the truth for the world to see. I watched silently as her carefully curated life began to unravel in real time. Her credibility, her control, her story of innocence, all collapsing like sand slipping through fingers. It was surreal, almost poetic. But I didn't gloat. That wasn't the point. The point was justice, truth, and protection of my daughter's world. Later that afternoon, I heard a knock at the door. I froze. My heart raced. My mind spun through the possibilities. It was her, my sister, arriving again. This time, the determination in her steps was different. She had seen the public reaction, realized the consequences, and now she needed to confront me. I didn't open the door immediately. Instead, I watched through the peephole. She was flustered, phone pressed to her ear, waving her free hand as if orchestrating some dramatic scene while trying to explain herself. Then the family group chat erupted again. Messages from my parents, Natalie, even my aunt, all anger, accusations, blame. You crossed a line. This is sick. Family business shouldn't be public. And yet, I had done nothing. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't commented. The narrative they had tried to force upon me was collapsing under its own weight. Finally, my husband stepped in. Calm, steady, unwavering. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. One simple sentence from him. Maybe next time. Think before calling someone's child a mistake. No hashtags. No dramatic commentary. Just truth. Just authority. The tension that had thickened the air outside our door began to dissipate. Slowly, one by one, the family backed down. No apologies. No explanations. Just slammed car doors and bitter glares fading into the distance. Inside, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The chaos had passed for now. I picked up the broken pieces of the bird feeder, stacking them gently on the counter. I glanced at my daughter's chalk drawings, now dry and faded in some spots, and felt a fierce surge of protectiveness. No one was allowed to touch her innocence again. Days passed. Screenshots of the sister's post, her comments, her likes, circulated online. People I had never met reached out privately to warn me, to support me, to validate what had happened. My parents had no way to rewrite the story. My sister could post all she wanted, but the truth had already spread. And then the first direct consequence came. My sister's husband. He called, his voice hollow, almost exhausted. I filed for divorce, he said. Check the drawer by your bed. My stomach dropped. I opened the drawer carefully. It was empty. The engagement ring, the symbol of my sister's past life, the one she always coveted, was gone. I felt neither anger nor panic, only a flat, exhausted acceptance. Of course she had taken it. She always took what she thought she deserved. When my husband arrived later, he handed me a small paper bag. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was the ring. She tried to sell it to a friend of mine, he said. I bought it back. I didn't know what to say. I held it in my hand, feeling the cold metal grounding me, reminding me that I was in control again. I didn't put it back on my finger. I set it on the nightstand. Its weight was a reminder of the world I had reclaimed. That night, our home felt quiet but full. We ate simple leftovers. My daughter showed him her chalk drawings, crawling into his lap like nothing had been broken in the universe at all. The ring stayed on the nightstand. My husband stayed in our home. And for the first time, I felt the fragile, delicate joy of stability returning. The days that followed were quiet, almost unnervingly so. My family tried, of course, they tried fake accounts, screenshots, gossip through mutual friends, but I didn't engage. I didn't respond. I didn't even mention it to my husband. Our world had grown quieter, and for the first time in years, I realized that silence could be a weapon just as strong as words. I blocked them all. Every number, every account, every group chat. Deleting them felt like extracting a thorn that had been lodged deep in my life for years. It hurt, but it also felt necessary. For my daughter, for myself, for the fragile sense of peace we had fought so hard to reclaim. My husband, the man I had been divorcing, had stayed. Quietly, calmly. He didn't demand explanations. He didn't ask for speeches. He didn't expect gratitude. He simply returned to the life we had built before the cracks appeared, the home we shared with our child, the routines, the small joys. He repaired what had been broken in ways both big and small, a leaky faucet, a loose cabinet hinge, a squeaky door. And through it all, he stayed by my side. The ring remained on the nightstand for a while. I didn't put it on immediately. I held it in my hand, feeling its weight, feeling the symbolism of control reclaimed, of boundaries enforced, of justice quietly served. It was a reminder that some battles don't need to be fought in anger, that some victories come through patience and calm strategy. Thanksgiving came and went. Photos of smiling faces, crowded tables, and family fun floated across social media. One empty chair stood out, obvious to anyone looking closely. I noticed it briefly and then turned away. It didn't hurt. I didn't feel the need to react. Their absence was a statement they made for themselves, not for me. And I didn't need to acknowledge it. Instead, I stayed home with my daughter and husband. We carved pumpkins. We baked pies. We laughed at her crooked drawings and chalk-stained knees. The world outside continued without us, but inside, we were whole. Imperfect, yes, but whole. And that was enough. Weeks later, the family still hadn't reached out. Probably never would. And I didn't mind. I had realized something important. Family doesn't automatically get access to your life. Blood doesn't give them a free pass to hurt you. Love isn't measured by proximity or expectations. It's measured by respect and care. And my family had failed to provide either. Sometimes I think about my sister and the chaos she tried to create, about the humiliation she thought she could impose, the lies she tried to spin, about how she wanted the world to see me as weak, as broken, as a mother who couldn't protect her child. And I smile quietly to myself because none of it worked. The truth had a way of finding its own path. The house became our sanctuary again. My daughter's laughter filled the rooms. Her artwork decorated the fridge. Her chalk rainbows faded from the sidewalk, but were replaced by new ones every day. My husband repaired things I didn't even notice needed fixing. We had returned, slowly and deliberately, to a rhythm that was ours. A life reclaimed. One evening, after my daughter was asleep, I sat on the porch with my husband, holding my hands around a warm cup of tea. We didn't need words. We didn't need to analyze the past. Just being there, together, in silence, felt like a victory. The weight of the family's cruelty, of their judgment, had lifted. The boundaries I had set were respected. The peace we fought for had been earned. Sometimes I think about the post that started it all. The photo, the caption, the laughter and cruel comments. And I realize now that it didn't define me. It didn't define my daughter. It was a moment, brief and ugly, but it passed. What mattered wasn't the humiliation. It was the choice I made in response. The choice to stand firm. The choice to protect my child. The choice to reclaim my life. And so life went on. Slowly, steadily. The house was full of small joys, ordinary routines, and quiet victories. The past was behind me, the future unwritten, and I knew one thing with absolute clarity. No one would ever take my peace away again. We weren't perfect. We weren't immune to conflict or mistakes. But we were together, whole, free from the toxicity that had haunted us for so long. And that was everything. The last time I checked my phone that night, it was quiet. No notifications. No messages. No chaos. Just silence. The kind that feels like safety, like victory, like home. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself smile, feeling the warmth of it settle in my chest, finally, completely, without hesitation.